Okay.
Thank you.
And then everybody starts hiding themselves. Okay, so let's read the first line over here. Page 8. After the big gray box. Anybody volunteer?
I will. You adorned them with garments.
Okay, and then I have my commentary on that. You want to read that or somebody else will read that?
You established from these 10 spirot 3 layers of worlds. The world of creation, the world of formation, and our world, the world of actualization.
Okay, go on to the next one.
And from these garments emerge souls for the sons of men. And by descending through these 3 worlds, the soul was able to invest itself within a human body.
Read to the bottom of the page.
You prepared many bodies for these garments. You first gave each sphera 3 layers of interface between them in these worlds. Those layers being the names or the containers, kilim, by which the spirit are called. That they are only called bodies relative to the garments that cover over them, that they are entirely unworldly and are only called bodies once they are garments that cover over them, meaning that they are only called spirit from the perspective of the world below. On their own plane, they are null entities absorbed within the light.
So you can see here that if you, oh, good evening. The sisters are here. Okay. You can see from here that if you were just reading the left column, and more so if you're reading the original Aramaic and the Zohar, you would either be completely confused, what on earth is it talking about, or come up with some conception which is totally different from what I've written here, which is according to the commentary of Rav Moshe Cordovero, I guess the most accepted commentary.
Can you talk about the soul?
No, it's not. That's the point. It says one little mention of souls, but it's not really about soul.
No, I know, but I want.
But there's a mention of soul there.
The soul upon conception, is the soul during the 9 months in the womb, or is the soul out there and sort of when you conceive, the soul is selected for you?
So you're putting in front of me a couple of decisions I have to make.
I'd just like to know what your view of the soul is, and when does one acquire
So the
a soul?
challenge is whether we're going to cover the material prepared.
Yeah, because I got to talk about worlds, but maybe in my talking about worlds, I'll be able to touch on souls because the souls are mentioned over here.
Oh,
So let's put it all in the context, one context here. Tonight is about worlds. And I think, yeah, in discovering what worlds are, we have to discover everything's tied together. But what are worlds? We already discussed a world. We discussed the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation. And then we said that's where the infinite light enters. The entry point being the sphere of Chachma. And from then you have 10 sphirot and you have an entire world. But that's a divine world. Now we're talking about 3 created worlds. They're creations, they're not emanations. What does that mean? So go back. Always good to go back to basic explanations that the Rambam gives. This helps an awful lot. This goes all the way back, and we discussed this last week, that huge question of the theologians always ask about and discuss, does God have attributes? Can you say that God is kind, that God is wise, that God is all-knowing, that God is mighty? Or as many theologians wanted to say, no, that's ridiculous. You can't say that. He's one. As soon as you're going to provide descriptions, then he's not one anymore. He's many things about him. Do you see the problem? You got to see the problem in that. If I describe, we say, fundamental about God that he's the only one, and therefore he can't possibly have any body or any form or any description. Because as soon as there's a description or a form or something, then you have two problems. Then there's multiple things about him, which makes him no longer one. And secondly, there will always have to be that which is not him, which is a bigger problem, really. As soon as you say he is this, you leave the possibility of, well, there's something else that's not that. Oh, then there's two gods, not one. There's what he is and what he's not. And we reject that. That means he's not really one. One means an absolute existence. There can't be anything else, anything outside of that. So this creates a problem. And this is what all the philosophers of all the Abrahamic religions had to discuss. How can he have kindness? How can he say that he's kind or that he's this or that? You can't have any descriptions, no descriptions whatsoever. Problem is, the Torah says that God is kind. And he says he's mighty. And he says that he's all-knowing. What's going on over here? Come up with all sorts of different solutions. Well, he created kindness. He created knowing. But that's not him. But the verse says he is. So the Maimonides, the Rambam says, we're not the first to deal with this. Already in the Psalms, you see in a prophetic voice, this idea all solved before us. What does it say? It talks about the fools that believe that God is not watching them. God is just up in heaven. He has nothing to do with us. And it says there in Tehillim, Hanoita Eizin Halo Yishma, Yotzer Ein Halo Yabit, the one who gave you ears, he doesn't hear. The one who gave you vision doesn't see. In other words, if he gave it to you, in order to give that to you, all the more so, he must have it. And he gives an example. He says, let's say a potter sees the clay, and he decides he's going to make it into a pot, into a vase. Before the vase appears out of the clay, it was already in his mind. He formed it first in his mind. Once it's in his mind, then he makes it into the vase. Okay, what about before he formed that vase in his mind? Was it there? Potentially, yes. Potentially, he could have, and the proof is that he was able to imagine this vase. So in some way, it was there. He was not conscious of it, but it was there. It came out of there in a certain way. So we say about God, well, if he's creating the worlds, he has an idea of this world that he wants to create before he starts creating it. It's, so to speak, there in thought. What about before it's there in thought? Was it there? So the Rambam answers very wisely. He says, you can't say that it's not there. As they call it, negative theology. You can't say that it's not there. So in what way is it there? It's there in the way of, you can't say otherwise. So we call this, there's a capacity for it. In Hebrew, Yucholos, it's Yachol. He's capable of it. Because you can't say he's not capable of it. Why can't you say he's not capable of it? Because he's capable of anything. So therefore, what is the vase or the person or the tree or whatever he's going to create in God's mind before he's even thought of creating it? It's just an element of his capacity to do anything. That's all it is. That's what we say. You say every morning in the preface to the prayers, Ad shelo nivra olam hayahu ushmo bilvad. Before the world was created, all there was was he and his name alone. Everybody asks, what's his name doing there? Just say there was just him alone. Was he and his name? What's the name got to do with anything? Just say there was just him. So we answer, well, he and his name are one. And in fact, hu in Hebrew, He, Vav, Aleph, stands for Hu Ushmo Echad. Yeah, but what about just him? Yeah, him is who and his name are one. So what's his name thing? What's the name? So interesting. Shemo, Shin Mem Vav, it's 346, is the same gematria as Ratzon, will. Nice way to remember. Okay, but will, our volition, means capacity, he's capable. Basically, when we're saying that there's just he and his name alone, we mean there's him, and he's capable of anything. So anything could be. Not only anything could be, but he could even choose which it is that he wants. Okay, so everything is there just as, because he's capable of it, that's all. So that we would say, that's in the what we talk about, how he's infinite. And the Or Ein Sof, anything could be. That's a first stage, initial stage. Then there's a stage where he's thinking, this is the kind of world I would like to have. He's creating it, so to speak, within himself. Everything that's going to be is there. I remember there was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic before Leonard Bernstein, Prokofiev. He would come out, bow to the audience, stand in front of the orchestra. He would lift up his baton, and he'd stand there like this. And then he would start. And it was annoying to everybody. I asked him, why don't you just start? You practiced all right. Why do you have to lift up your baton? And he answered, I have to go through the symphony one time in my mind before we start. How long did it take him? About 20 seconds, which was for everybody else eternity, but in 20 seconds he went. So we say that before God creates the world, it's all there, biskirachas, in one glance. Everything is one. It all exists. So then comes this world of emanation. And the world of emanation is how God is thinking about the world. He hasn't yet made a world. There is no world, it's just him. But just like the potter has that vase in his mind before he goes creating the vase, or a speaker has the speech in his mind before he actually speaks it. A musician knows the music before playing it, and Prokofiev had the whole symphony. So the same thing over here, all in Atzilus is like the blueprint of the world. It's how everything is in God's mind beforehand. That's a world. And then he actually starts creating it. And even as he creates it, it's in layers, strata upon strata upon strata, till it gets to our world. So that's what we need to discuss next, is how do we get from that world of emanation, where we say is a divine world, just God's thought of the world, to an actual world actually being. That's the next step.
So just potential, like the potential existence, is that like the kind of existence even before the world of Atzilut, or that's like that's a specific part of it? Because you were saying that, like, how can you say something does or doesn't exist if it exists as like potential? So that potential, is that part of the world of Atzilut? Like, is that like
In the first, I gave two stages. First, it's an absolute, just like with the potter, he has it in mind, his mind, but before he had it in mind, he was capable of it. So the same thing, Atzilus is when it's already decided this is the kind of world it's going to be. But beforehand, it was there in capacity because you can't say it was not there.
Is there a word for that, like pre-stage?
The what?
Was there a word for that pre-stage?
We call it, the earliest we call it just yichelis, possibility, as opposed to a potential. There's a difference in between a capacity for something or the potential of something. If it's just there in capacity, it doesn't have to be.
Is the
like-
capacity then different than saying or Ein Sof?
In the Or Ein Sof, we say that everything was there in yichelis, in capacity,
So the
but it's
two-
not really potential.
Can we say that that's synonymous, the capacity, the world capacity and the world of or Ein
Or
Sof?
Ein Sof, yeah, you could do that. Roughly, yeah. Whereas the world of Atzilus is where it's there in potential. Potential is something that's going to, somehow it's going to come out. It will happen. Whereas in capacity, if I bring you a match and a matchbox, okay, I could make fire out of this, but I don't have to. I have to do this, and if I decide, it doesn't happen, but it doesn't have to be. But there are other situations where, there will be a fire. Just leave that alone, and there's going to be a fire. That's it. That means it's in actual potential. So potential will come to actual state, but capacity doesn't ever have to. So it's very fundamental that God doesn't have to create a world. God is not like some mathematical formula out of which a world has to come. That's a fundamental difference between how I think most physicists would have viewed the world. Things have to happen. They happen because they have to happen. Something has. It could happen this way, it could happen that way, but something has to happen. Whereas when you view the world as God created, the fundamental distinction there is that you're saying nothing has to be.
We're told that he created the world because he wanted to share his kindness. Again, that's saying that he's kind, and that's why he created the world. So all this is not true.
So we say that ultimately that can't be the real reason. Ultimately, no, because when he created the world, he decided, I'm going to create the world in order that there be kindness. But he could have decided, who needs a world? He doesn't have to create a world.
So I have a question to
Okay, I'll let you
understand
talk
that.
to Joy, talk to everybody.
Oh, okay. Hi,
It's
everybody.
very rude for you to talk to machines when there are people here.
Oh, okay. Hi. So my question is
Mhm.
if I heard you correctly, you just said that things didn't have to be because at some point God had not decided to make a world. But once he decided to make the world and he decided how and the content and the character of the world, do certain things, like to your point about the laws of physics, is that at that point, is that when those sorts of things like the laws of physics apply? Because that is the nature of the world he created once he decided to create.
Okay, it's a very good question. Even though you're just a little person on my screen. These little boxes, they say good stuff sometimes. So you could have two things. You could have, well, God decides, and from that point on, it's just a box. It's just a system. And then he would have created a closed system and he could walk off. That's it. Or you could say, well, no, the world in every way reflects its creation, how it was created. You say like the end product, the product reflects process, the ontology of it, the structure of things reflects its ontology of how it got that way. So we say that since God created the world, it was free in how he's going to create the world. Therefore, he created a world in which he's free to do whatever he wants from that point on. And there can be miracles. And even within nature, anything could happen. You know, at one time we believed in a world where everything was a perfect system. Think like in the 19th century, when everything was determinist, and from one cause could only come one effect, and that was it. And but that we blew that away in the 20th century. It's not so. You can have two atoms in exactly the same state, and in a few seconds later is absolutely different things happening with them. So we know the world's pretty loose. At any rate, once God created the world, he still has freedom, complete freedom with it. He didn't make himself a slave to it. The only thing is, he decided water will flow and fire will burn and wind will blow. These are my characters. Like he set up parameters. And he gave character Bibles to each one. This is how you're going to behave. This is where. But within that structure, he can do whatever he wants. Literally anything that he wants. Like the Baal Shem Tov told one of his students, he said, "What are you worried about? At any moment, God could make the entire world into absolute nothing and then recreate it entirely all over again. Who knows? He may have just done that. So what are you worried about?" Yeah, so there's still freedom within the world. Did I tell you that last week? This is one of my favorite midrashim. It's a midrash about how before God created each thing, I did last week. Before he created each thing, he said to the frog, "Would you like to be a frog?" And the frog said, "Yes, I want to be a frog." And he said to the honeybee, "Would you like to be a honeybee?" "I'd love to be a honeybee." Right? He said, "Jason, would you like to be Jason?" And he said, "Yeah, that's who I want to be." Each thing. Oh, so like, what does it mean? How can you ask something before it exists? But that's the way they talk in the Medrash. They say these things that are meant to, like, what? To get you puzzled, so you'll think about what do they really mean. What it means is, the God said, "I chose to have a world. So therefore, everything in my world has to choose to be what it is." Now take a look at the world around you. It's something we cannot replicate. All the living beings that we see are choosing all the time. The little honeybees that just came out now, all those little pollinators, they're having a delightful time going from one flower to the other. And you see it's like choices that they're making. I'll try this flower, I'll try that flower out. You get to higher mammals, you see it's so obvious, like that your dog is choosing to chase that cat, and certain cats it chooses not to chase it. Even you're going to say, well, it's just instinctual, and it's limited within its instincts. But if we would make a mechanical dog, it would work very differently. A mechanical dog, you could explain exactly why it chased that cat. And it would be you programmed it to, and it'd be entirely predictable in every way. And you could reduce the whole thing to a simple algorithm. You can't do that with animals. They work on completely different bases. They're searching for pleasure, and they're choosing which is the best pleasure, which is the best way to get that pleasure. What would I enjoy best? What would I enjoy being? So God's world is constantly asking the very first question he asked, what would I enjoy being? Except that he didn't have to be anything. That's all. That's his world. I think. Anybody go for a walk this last Sunday, Friday?
Yeah.
Did you see what's happening out there? It's miraculous. Like two things that just stunned me this time of year. One is seeing dead wood coming alive. Mm-hmm. Dead wood that a week ago I could have cracked like that, and now like there's leaves coming. And the other thing is like seeing people walking around blindly, as though like it's just 2 weeks ago and nothing happened. It's totally. Isn't it miraculous what's happening this time of year? I don't know. People don't. Other people don't think so. I think.
So we see it every time, every year, so it becomes less miraculous to us, right?
Yeah, we get old.
I discussed with somebody today. He said, he asked how my weekend was. I said it was the most amazing weekend I've had. And he says, it's because everything's coming alive. And I said, you know what? That has something to do with it, for sure. Everything's coming alive.
We had this.
Get out.
We had that fall spring, like at the beginning of the year, and we have a gigantic laurel bush, like 10 feet tall. It was after the freezing cold. The next day, it was like 60-something degrees outside, and I come out the next morning, all the leaves are on the ground. And didn't just happen with that, happened with all the other trees. I went down to pine nurseries and I asked them, so did they die? He says, well, we'll wait till March and find out. And so 2 months later, I go out and see the laurel bush and these little leaves on these branches that were dead. I could have cracked them like that. You could just go like this and they fall out. And out of those little twigs are coming leaves. So nobody could program. There's no algorithm for this. That's what I'm talking about. There's no algorithm for such a thing. That laurel bush is deciding, I want to live. Just like every cell in your body, when a human being gets hurt, right? All these cells are rushing to that place to fix it. And it's not like the brain is telling each cell where to go. The brain releases, your doctors here. I got wrong territory. I got doctors in front of me. Releases hormones that tell the body, we got a boo-boo over there. And somehow the cells know how to line up in order that first these guys go, then those guys go, and all the while get some antibodies around there at the same time. All this whole system is working. This body wants to be alive. And each cell of the body wants to be alive. Just like when they do mitosis, they want to, at this point, decided that, okay, I'm going to do mitosis now. I mean, but when you look at the big picture, it's so clear the difference between a mechanism that human beings make and an organism that God makes is this volition. I'm deciding this is how I will get pleasure. All of it is reflecting, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Why? Because he decided to. And that's it. Okay, it's just the thing that fascinates me the most right now. So I keep on coming back to it. Yeah.
I heard that God looked into the Torah to create our world. So did he decide to create the world, wrote the Torah, and then use that? How does?
Yeah, the Torah is actually the world of Atzilus.
What?
The world of what?
Atzilus, of emanation.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
Okay.
That blueprint of the world, it's all there. It's the inner light of that world of emanation. Okay, now that's review of everything until now. You adorned them with garments. We're talking about this 10 spheres of the world of Atzilus, and God now clothes them. And he puts 3 layers of clothing on them. One layer of clothing is the world of creation. Then another layer of clothing is the world of formation. And the 3rd layer of clothing is our world. So what is our world? Our world is clothing. So let's imagine it like this in order to get that better. Let's say God is a storyteller. The world of Atzilus is the story in his mind. Before he's told a story, it's in his mind. And then he actually starts telling the story. We are the actual story that he's telling. A story is clothing. I learned this from his name was Professor Steinberg. He's an old professor of English literature at the University of British Columbia. I didn't take his course, but it was a friend of his. I told him, Dr. Steinberg, I have a problem. Maybe you can help me with it. I have to give a course on how to make a game out of a movie. I was giving adult education classes. So to technical people who are trying to adapt to new things, like before it was films, now we have to make games. So I had done that. So I have to give I said, so what do I say? How do you do it? He said, he said, simple. It's the same as when you make a book into a movie. You want to make a movie into a game. It's the same process as making a book into a movie. How do you make a book into a movie? You can't take the book, here's the dialogue, and it's not going to work, right? The book's 500 pages, not going to. What do? First, you pay off the author. You pay him off all the money he wants and send him off far away. Don't come back. Because if you leave him around, he'll drive you nuts, okay? You get rid of him. Once you got rid of him, you say, what was in his mind when he wrote this book, right? In other, what was he trying to get across? What's he trying? No. Because why?
Was in his mind.
He has no clue. He doesn't know. Authors sometimes are amazed to hear people's interpretation of their story, and you've asked them, were they right? I don't know. I guess so. That's how writing works. Okay. So you pay the guy, you get rid of him. Okay. Okay. You look at what was in his mind. Why was it? And so let's say it's a mystery story or a murder story or something like that. It's not about murder. It's not story. Plot is entirely secondary. If it's a good story, it's because this guy has a certain sense of what the world is all about. He has a certain conception of what human beings are. And he has a need to convey that to other people. Or maybe it's about himself and how he reacts to the world. But there's something there that he's trying to convey. So the first problem is, how do we tell this, get across that same story, and the guy gets the girl in the end? Okay, because usually in the book he doesn't, but in the movie he has to, okay? And other things like that. We can totally change around the whole story as long as we preserve what we really like about it is this guy's take on the world. That's what you're doing. Which means the book, the story, is clothing. It's clothing. It's an interface for him to express his ideas to the world. But if you just take the words in the book and just the story, you don't have it. That's like a real book buffs. They don't say, I'm reading Grapes of Wrath. They say, I'm reading, what was his name? Who was it?
Steinbeck.
Steinbeck, that's Steinbeck. I'm reading Steinbeck. Okay, that's how you really say it. They feel I'm communing with the author. You're communing with the author, you got all the interface out of the way. And if it's a good interface, are you using interface and clothing interchangeably? If it's a good interface, it becomes transparent and you just feel the author inside. A good performance of a good musician, you feel you're communing with the musician. You don't even hear the music. I think I gave this example in the first class. If you're multilingual and you hear a great class or a great talk or whatever, and you're really excited about it, and you come back and you tell somebody, he said this, and he said that, and he said this, and they ask you, what language did he say it in? I can't remember. Wait a minute, didn't you listen? I wasn't listening to his language. I was listening to him. See what I mean? That's a lavush, it's clothing, it's just an interface. So now, or we could call it a muscle, a metaphor. The story is a metaphor. All stories, not just Animal Farm and Gulliver's. travels. All stories are metaphors. A lavush, a garment, clothing, interface. So get this, our world is a metaphor. That's what it means, it's clothing. Really, what God is conveying over here is himself. But he's doing it by putting us inside this story game. And you have 70, 80, 120 years to figure out what this game is really all about. And if you're fortunate, you discover an infinite God inside. So that's what it means over here. You adorned them with garments. You took the 10 sefirot of Atzilus, where God, we said, and totally invested himself to the point that we can say that that's, so to speak, God's personality, as far as he's relating to the world. And within each sefira, you feel his infiniteness and his mysteriousness and his unknowableness. And it says, well, if they can't relate to that, I'll put clothing on top of it. I'll make it into a whole story. It will have time and space, at least an illusion of time and space. And they'll go through it, they'll live through it, and they'll struggle with it. The fortunate ones will struggle with it. And through that, they will come to know what? To know him. That's all it is. Okay, so you adorn them with garments. And these are these three worlds. Now, what I need to do is take you through, why are there three worlds? He only wants this world. This is the world we live in. Why did he create three worlds? It's actually questionable. Do we really live in this world or in a higher world? I'll explain to you. Where do human beings live? And a world of sensation, where we touch things, we see things, we perceive things, and things are happening around us, sensations are happening. Maybe not. Maybe human beings live in a world of words. It's a beautiful book by Oliver Sacks, Seeing Voices. Oliver Sacks, a British neurologist. You ever read it? Beautiful.
Oliver Sacks and stuff with the Rabbi Sacks. Oliver Sacks.
No, that's Jonathan Sacks. They're not related.
Yeah, Oliver Sacks is from the Bronx.
He's from where? Bronx. I thought he was British.
Albert Einstein. Maybe Albert Einstein did back to Brooklyn. He trained and did medicine at Albert Einstein.
He did. Wow, I didn't know that.
In
I was
this-
sure he was British.
In this world.
The man who
In this world, and with his clothing.
Okay, I have to believe you.
You don't have to do anything.
Where was Oliver Sacks born? It's going to say the Bronx. I know that.
No,
And I don't understand what you're talking. It says he was born in Williston, which is 5 miles northwest of Charing Cross. I'm sorry, I won this one. That's we'll send you the bill.
You won?
Yeah, I won it. Oliver Sacks, it says, was born in Williston.
Is that in England?
Yeah, it's 5 miles north of Charing Cross. Northwest, it's an area of northwest London. Oh, well, but he was American afterwards, I'm sure. I mean, he studied from Albert Einstein and didn't do that in London, that's for sure.
Well, Williston has a real good connection.
Okay, okay, whatever, okay. But
Yeah.
I mean, with a name like, how many Americans have a name like Oliver, you know? So it must have been British, that's what I figured.
Oliver is a good.
Yeah. So, okay, so Oliver Sacks wrote, the same guy who wrote The Man Who Mistake His Wife for a Hat, right? Wrote Seeing Voices, where he discusses the deaf community. And people, and especially gets into people who learned language later in life. You know, like Helen Keller was a classic, but there were others. It started back in the 18th century already. There was a bishop, I can't remember his name, who taught deaf people to write. He taught them names of things, and eventually, and he describes taking this, the first instance we have of a deaf person learning language. He's taking this guy out for a walk in the woods every day. And he says, points to a tree and writes tree. Points to bush, writes bush. Water, writes water. And he just keeps on showing it every day after day. So persistent, if it weren't for the OCD people, we'd be nowhere. He's persistent every day doing the same thing. And then one day he's doing it, and his fellow's got his book there, and his fellow points to something. And he writes again, tree. And he gets it. Points to something else, rock. Points to and he says, now he's going wild with it. Everything has to have a name. Everything has to have a name. So this, can't remember his name, this bishop writes, I felt like I was in the Garden of Eden with Adam as he was naming all of the creatures. And he's naming all of the creatures and asserting his domain over them, his dominion over them. Amazing. So there's this huge transformation that happens to human beings when they learn language. It's not just now I have a way to communicate, but think of it. What is the tree before you learn the word tree? We can't even start to imagine, right? We can't imagine coming across a tree without tree having a name for it. But what does it do when the tree now is called tree? Until it was tree, it was a sensation. And over here is a similar sensation. Over there is a similar sensation. Does this tree and this tree have anything to do with each other? Not much. Now, this one and this one are both tree. Oh, but they're different. Oh, so I'll call this an elm tree and this an oak tree. And now, hold on. It doesn't stop there. Before you had the word tree, could you imagine a tree that does not exist? Very doubtful. I mean, we can't prove it. There's no way to tell. But most likely, no. Tree now is the language is the beginning of abstract thinking, where you're no longer thinking of just sensations, you're creating categories. Once you create categories of things, trees, bushes, and then subcategories of what evergreen and deciduous and so on. And now you can imagine things that you've never seen. You could imagine a tree that flies or a tree that walks. Something that you've never seen. Okay, and it goes on. The school that talked the most about this was the Vygotsky school in Russia. And after Vygotsky and Alexander Lurie, these guys, all Jews, but they talked about thought and language. That's Vygotsky's books, Language and Thought. Where do human beings live? What is the most favorite pastime of human beings? It's talking with each other, telling stories. We live all day long in a world of words. And that world of words is an entirely different world than the animals are living, where they have no language. We've been trying for about 100 years now to teach animals language, and it just doesn't fly. Of all the apes and so on and parrots we've taught language, they'll never come up with a new sentence all of their own. And they don't use it between themselves. They use these languages. We teach them just get a banana from us, and that's it.
I mean, the million monkeys in the room with a million typewriters, they won't eventually type out Hamlet.
Actually, they say it was attempted, and that's how we have the internet. Okay. I'm sorry, that was the monkeys on the typewriters? Yeah, okay. Um, the people on the boxes over here.
Very small.
So the world of sensation is highly limited, everything very compartmentalized. There's no room for abstraction. It's entirely within, really tightly bonded within time and space, bounded within time and space. Whereas the world of words, you could be talking right now about something that you've never seen, a place where you've never been. And it's as though it's here right now. You are, to a certain degree, transcending time and space. You can be preserving something that's happened a long time ago, and for you, it's right here, right now, like we do on Pesach when we tell the story of the Exodus, like it's happening right now. So that's what words do. Words allow us to be self-aware. Because in order to talk to somebody else, you need to be able to hear yourself from outside of yourself. How is this person hearing me? Right? You can't really communicate with somebody unless you're empathizing. What?
Most people are not self-aware when you communicate.
They do or they don't?
They don't. Most people are not self-aware, but communicate anyway.
Yeah, they're the bad communicators.
Right.
The good communicators are the people who are listening to themselves from within your mind. But they can't get into your mind.
Right.
So they have to construct a concept of your mind and your view in their heads, and then do this work of imagining how they're being heard from within this model of your mind that they've made. It takes a lot of energy, so we just give up on the whole thing. But we try, it's so hard. But that's how we become self-aware.
Mhm.
We only need to be self-aware. What do we need to be self-aware for? How does that help us? Only in socializing and communicating with words. So language not only takes you beyond self and time and space, it takes you beyond yourself. You can look at yourself from outside of yourself because you have words. That's an entirely different world than the animals are living in, or a baby, an infant is living in. So here we have two worlds that we live. We're fluxing back and forth between this world of sensation and our world of words, and bringing our world of sensation into words and our words into sensation, and we travel back and forth between the two. They exist inside us, these two worlds. And we have a deeper world, a private world. It used to be private until there was Facebook. But the private world is the world where you're thinking your thoughts to yourself. The language that's inside you. Not your, it's not thought in the sense of my intellect, my brain. No, it's just you speaking to yourself. There are people who tell me they never speak to themselves in their mind. Intelligent, educated people, they say that. It seems like about 5% of people don't hear or are not aware of anybody, any voice talking in their mind. And they're the ones who look at you like you're totally nuts when you're saying such a thing. So nobody's looking at me like I'm nuts now. But I did it once on a live Facebook thing, and I put up a poll. And it was about 6%, I think, of 240 something people. But they say, well, they see images, they hear sounds and so on, but they don't, very rare that a person says that there's nothing going on in their mind, but there are such people too. Okay, but there's this other world of thought. Why is thought different than the world of speech? When you're talking with other people, or when you're talking to yourself, it's two different worlds. it's very frustrating. You thought through a whole idea, you got it clear in your mind, and then you talk to somebody else, and it just doesn't come across. It doesn't work. The words that you speak are not the same as the words in your mind. The words in your mind are glowing, they're shining. A few words mean so much, like you ask somebody who has what to say, would you like to say a few words in front of us? He says, just a minute, give me a moment to think about it. Okay, I got it. And then he stands up and speaks for an hour, right? And in his thoughts, he's able to think in a few minutes, words that take an hour to say. So as much as our language transcends our sensation, the world of thought, an inner world of our inner consciousness, really transcends in ways like I haven't yet grasped to be able to describe our words, our world of language, of just speaking. So those are worlds inside ourselves. We are a microcosm of the entire universe. Everything is a microcosm. It's like I mentioned the holographic universe, where every part of the universe is just the entire universe from a different perspective, but especially the human being is a microcosm of the entire universe. And here we are living within the thought, speech, and action of our Creator. It's interesting, the Arizal says that really the place of the human being is in the world of speech. We end up falling into this world. But we're called the speaking being. Interesting, we're not called the thinking being, or the tool-making being, or we're called the speaking being. That's what we're really about. There are people who are just thinking beings, okay? We are living in this world where God's thought, speech, and action, it's all there. And we, in a certain way, traverse worlds going back and forth between them. But what we see, what we are aware of, is a world that's very concrete, very tangible, high-resolution world. Much like our world of sensation is a very high-res world, very bounded within time of space. If we would be able to traverse worlds and go up into the world of formation, which is a world of speech, then we would see that things are much looser. Time and space are not so tightly bound up. Things are far more abstract there. We say that's the world of angels. And if we could go up into the world of thought, it's totally, the world hardly exists over there. It's just a thought, that's all. So those are the worlds. And you can imagine, so what would it be like to be a creature in the world of formation? Or the world of creation? What would it be like to be a creature there? What would you see? What would you perceive? Everything would be very abstract. If I don't have a pen on me, sorry. Don't even have a paper. Oh, here I have a paper. Okay, so we don't. You know that picture, thank you. You know that picture. I didn't even have to do that. I got this right in front of me. I don't need that. I don't, it's like you have the paper back. I can use this. I forgot about that. I just see, I got a whole screen there in front of me. Okay, so when I draw something here, this is my pen. I draw something. I hope I can do this. Oh, okay. What do you see? Talent. Thank you so much. Cancel. Do you see this as the foreground inside here? And this is background? Or do you see this as being the background and that's the foreground? Which one do you see?
Is it the face or the face?
Yeah. So if I would, you know, the one about that image of you asked, is it an old woman
Mhm.
or is a young lady looking the other way? Okay, and there are many others like the square that's both is it convex or is it concave? Which way is it? Right, something like that. You know what I'm talking about, but that's not well done. So try this. Look at any of those figures. You don't have to do it now. Any of those figures, and try to see both at the same time.
You can go back
Yeah.
and forth, but you can't process the.
Can't do it.
And
Cannot
why
do
is
it.
that?
What?
And why is that?
Because this is what perception is all about. Perception is about taking a lot of stimuli and giving it one meaning. Without our capacity to do that, we can't walk out the front door. Forget the front door. You don't want to get out of bed, right? You can't do anything. If you're going to walk around with two interpretations of everything you say, you see, forget it. So our mind immediately, as fast as it can, says, that's a squirrel, it's not a cat. Right? And that's it. You know, like when you're looking for your wallet and you know you did not leave it on the night table. As much as you look at the night table, you're not going to see it there. Even though it's right there in front of you. Your mind decides this is reality, and that's it. And it can only work. It's designed to only have one interpretation of reality. That's it. So I imagine that there's a higher world where creatures have multiple interpretations at a time. And they are living an entirely different reality. And that's why, for example, we can't see emotions. Why not? Why can't you see an emotion? You can see a person's face, and you can construct in your mind that it's this or that, and we call it this. But the actual emotion, we can't see. Well, we can't see it because an emotion is not defined. It doesn't have a strong definition to it. Just as ideas don't have tight definitions to them. But we only perceive that which has high definition to it. It's this and not that.
But I'm confused though. You said you don't see emotion, but if you see someone that their facial expressions are revealing anger,
Yes.
aren't you seeing anger?
No, you're
What
seeing
is
the
it?
facial expressions. Seeing the facial expression, and if I asked you, are you seeing anger? You would have to say, I'm seeing a facial expression, and I'm assuming that it's anger. But you're not seeing actual anger. Well, anger is a thing. Why can't you see it?
So what we're doing is we're seeing certain shapes on the face, and we're attributing those shapes to mean anger.
Yeah, and we're very often wrong. That's Malcolm Gladwell's book. Did you read that one?
What's
He
that?
said, Malcolm Gladwell, I can't remember, where he talks about how we're so often wrong in interpreting people's faces.
I see.
Only in the movies do people's faces mean what they're saying. That's so. But I'm imagining this. I never asked one to find out that a malach, an angel, just sees emotion. He doesn't have to see a face. He sees the emotion itself. It's a thing. Why can't he see it? It's a piece I wrote, The Angel Files. It starts off with this guy who's doing a search, he's trying to determine why it is he can't see his soul. We talked about soul at the beginning of the class. I didn't address it. And finally, he gets tech help from an angel. And the angel says, you can't see what? You can't see my soul. Well, what do you see? I see my body. Body, what's that? Describe it. The angel can't imagine seeing a body. What's a body? And finally, the angel finally figures out that you're living in only 3 dimensions. What? How do you manage? Okay, the angel files, look it up. I'm sorry I didn't get to souls, but I'm hoping that next week I get to the idea of a soul and
It's not important.
it's very important. But we did.
I've lost it all.
You grew up with one, or you didn't have? It's not what Descartes said, is it? It is the soul. There's no pineal gland.
Pardon?
There's no pineal gland, like Descartes said. It's not so distinct from the body as they make it out to be. The body and the soul become one. But it's not. It's not. I'm still trying to figure it out, the soul thing. But maybe for next week. Right now, so when we ended off there on page 8 again, we said that from these garments emerge souls, which you would interpret as being, so first he makes worlds, and then out of the worlds emerge these souls. But no, that's not what it means. The souls actually come from the kalim, the containment of light in the world of emanation. But in order for them to be able to come into human form within bodies, they have to descend through these 3 worlds. Some souls descend only through one world. Some souls descend all the way to Yetzirah, the world of formation, before coming into a body. And other souls descend all the way to the world of Asiya before coming into a body. But they have to go through these worlds. What?
We live,
Who what?
we live in a city.
We live in Asiya, but our souls, many of us, our souls really are souls of Yetzirah, and others are souls of Asiya. There are people, all they want to know is, what do you want me to do? Right?
Yeah.
And there's other people who are interested in why, what are the ideas? and
Does
so
that
on.
mean, though, then the souls that come from the world of Yetzirah are more evolved, more
I didn't
more
see
like
the world
Chasidic,
evolved.
I don't know.
I just saw the Mittler Rebbe. He's describing that there are people who they just want to know, tell me what to do and I'll do that. Okay. What does God want from me? I'll do that. Very good. They're very eager to know and to do that. And you start telling them why. I don't need to hear any of that. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's nice, but what's got to do with me, And then there are other people who they don't want to hear, do this, do that, don't do this. They want to know, like, what's this world all about? What is life? And you tell them, in the beginning, God created heaven. Wow, that's awesome. I get all excited. He says, it sounds like each one is doing pretty good. But the problem is the people who are interested in what do I do, they're the people who get so caught up in making a living and earning more money and making a business that they forget about what it is they're supposed to be doing. And the people who get so excited about how, why, and what, and so on, they're the people who are very passionate, and they get sucked into all sorts of other passions instead. And he says the first group are the world of Asiya, of action souls, and the others are Yetzirah, the world of formation souls. I thought that's neat. Okay.
And I'm in the world of authentic.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. See you all next week.
Question for
Yeah.
All right, so you were talking and saying that words and speech are in oral formation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But wouldn't formation coincide with Yetzirah?
Yetzirah is
Yeah.
formation. Yeah, that's speech.
Right, so
What you're asking why? What does formation have to do with speech?
well, no, I think.
I would have thought that's a good question.
Right.
If you don't ask it, that's fine.
No, I mean, it just seems to me that if we're talking you're, where, so Chachma is above all that, right?
Chachma. Well, the world of Atzilus is all Chachma.
Right, that,
Dominates there.
so.
In Bria, Bina
I guess
dominates.
Like, because we're talking, and this is kind of why I took this class, because I get confused, where Chachma Bina Das come and fit into Atzilus, Bria, Atzilus, and Atzilus.
So all 10 in every world are all 10 spheres.
In each form.
In each world, yeah. And of these 4, there's many, many, many of each.
Right.
So, so in every world, the world has to have all 10. But in the world of Atzilus, Chachma dominates. In the world of Bria, Bina dominates. In the world of Yetzirah, all of the Midas, words, Netzach, so those dominate. And the world of Asiya, Malchus dominates. That's what's dominant in each world. So speaking is all about midas. Yeah? You feel when you speak. Thought is in Bina, in understanding. And in the Chacham is a world of oneness, the divine world. Oneness. Which world do you want to live in? I like where I am now, but well, we're not trying to get. We're trying to get this world to be even better than Atzilus. That's the goal. Make it that way. Oh, okay. I'm also off the world.
So the world of Yetzirah, you say.
Thank you for coming, Joy and California Shmuel. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The world of Yetzirah.
Thanks.